can't go wrong when you put Duke Ellington and Train together. You cannot go wrong with Duke Ellington and John Coltrane. That one's called The Feeling of Jazz. I've been waiting on this hour as we celebrate the new book from Larry Ty. It's called The Jazz Men, How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie Transformed America. A great conversation on tap with a lot of good music this hour. Larry Ty, how are you, sir?
I'm great, and great to be back on with you, Tavis.
It's great to have you back on this program. Thank you for your time. Let me start with the obvious, I suspect, for a conversation about a book called The Jazz Men, How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie Transformed America. Why those three individuals?
So it goes back to an earlier book I wrote on the black men who worked on the railroad from the end of the Civil War until the 1960s, the Pullman Porters. And the Pullman Porters made me promise after I interviewed them that someday I would write two other books. One was on their favorite athlete that they ever carried on their trains, a guy named Satchel Paige, and I wrote about him a few years ago. Mm-hmm. And the other was about their three all-time favorite passengers, three guys named Duke, the Count, and Louis. And the reason they were their favorite passengers says to me a lot about what America was like in that Jim Crow era. That even though these were the three most illustrious musicians, I think, in America in that time, when they went below the Mason-Dixon line on tour, every time that they were deciding what restaurant to eat at or what hotel to try to rent a room, it was potentially a fatal decision if they went into the wrong place. And the only way that they could be insured to be safe was to hire a private Pullman sleeping car to take them south. And if they were, let's say, doing a concert in Atlanta, that car would pull off to the sidetrack. They'd go off and perform their concert. And at the end of the concert, they were guaranteed they would have a great meal waiting for them. They would have a plush bed. And in return, they did something amazing, which was they held a private jam session for the Pullman Porters in the middle of the night. And Tavis, I don't know about you, but if I could go back in any moment in history, I wouldn't mind having Duke Ellington give me a private performance in that closed capsule of the railroad car.
That just your telling of that story is gives me goosebumps. It's amazing just to hear that story. I can't imagine how those Pullman Porters must have responded to having that sort of intimate audience with all three of these iconic artists, Larry.
So they responded. So you and I can imagine how they responded, and it was with joy, and yet it was with horror that they had to do this to keep them alive. And long before there was anything like the Green Book, the way that traveling African Americans dealt with their safety was by understanding from people like the Pullman Porter who spent their lives on the road where there was a place that they could stay that was safe. Mrs. Smith in Charlotte might rent rooms and prepare a great meal for them, but there was always the idea that you were Duke Ellington and you had to worry about your safety just as beyond the pale.
Yeah. How do you process? I've wrestled with this so many times in my own mind, Larry. But how do you process all that these great artists, we're talking now, of course, about Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, Count Basie, and the subjects of your book, The Jazz Men, how do you process that they were as iconic, to your point, they transformed America? We'll get to that part about this transformation in a moment. But what do you make of the fact that they were as majestic as they were when they hit the stage, given all that they were dealing with off stage, backstage? You take my point.
So I do take your point, and I want to answer that by just zeroing in on the case of Louis Armstrong.
Okay.
Every morning, just about every morning of his adult life, he started the morning spending 30 minutes in the bathroom, rolling a big joint and getting high. He ended his day in his dressing room doing the same thing. Now, on the one hand, he wrote an entire memoir that was essentially an homage to marijuana, and he liked getting high. But I think it was something much more than that. I think this guy took to heart not just how hard it was to be a musician and be on the road 300 days a year playing, all night, but I think it was having to do that and having the level of stress that Jim Crow presented, just those two things together would have made me want to get high every morning and every night. And I think that just to lower his level of anxiety, and can you imagine that these guys were headliners at nightclubs in Las Vegas that they could only enter through the kitchen? And just the combination of reverence and indignity that America treated these guys with is a contradiction that I can't explain.
No, I can't explain it either. And that's why I am humbled every time I think about the brilliance of their craft and all that they curated and created, all that they composed and gave to the world, over and against all that they were up to every single day. But I ain't mad at Louis Armstrong. He had it all figured out for himself at least. One joint in the morning, one joint at night, and we'll make all this happen. The book is called The Jazz Men, How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie Transformed America. Its author is our guest in this hour for the hour. So pleased to be talking right now on Tavis Smiley to Larry Time.
You're listening to Tavis Smiley. Tavis Smiley. Ranked number 45 on the Heavy 100 list of the 100 most important radio talk show hosts in America.
Hey y'all, Mona Swain here from Target's new YouTube series, My Cart is Full, where we feature Black founders and creators highlighting their connection to our community. As an actor and content creator, I love using my voice to inspire young Black women who look like me. When it comes to feeding my shine, seeing myself reflected in Black-owned and founded products at Target brings me joy. Together, we are Black Beyond Measure. Learn more at target.com/Black Beyond Measure.
Cookie wants to be a professional wrestler.
I'm Cookie Serratos, and I'm 11 years old.
She also wants to win all the medals. That's why Cookie and her family make every day count, squeezing out her best with Go-Go Squeeze.
Okay, Cookie, let's break for a Go-Go Squeeze.
Go-Go Squeeze fruit-on-the-go pouches are a nutritious snack made from 100% fruit with no sugar added.
Go, Cookie!
Because when you nurture your kids, you squeeze out the best in them. Squeeze out the best with Go-Go Squeeze. Not a low-calorie food. Products range from 11 to 13 grams of sugar and 60 to 70 calories per serving.
Sometimes we lose, sometimes we win. Sometimes we try to fit it all in. Sometimes we don't know what's in store. Sometimes we find what we're looking for. Sometimes we're rolling easy and free. Sometimes 1 and 1 makes 3. So much to love along this ride. That's why Nationwide is on your side.
Nationwide Mutual Insurance Company and Affiliates, Columbus, Ohio.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580, connecting you with services and solutions. Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles is a nonprofit law firm that protects and advances the rights of the most underserved, leveling the playing field and ensuring that everyone can have access to the justice system. Every year, LAFLA provides free, high-quality legal services to more than 100,000 people living in poverty across greater Los Angeles. Their unique combination of neighborhood offices, self-help centers at courthouses, and domestic violence clinics puts Legal Aid Foundation of Los Angeles on the front lines in vulnerable communities and at the forefront of change. LAFLA's expert team of attorneys, paralegals, and support staff works to provide direct representation, offer counsel and advice, provide referrals, and educate the community about their legal rights through workshops and seminars. With locations all over LA, you can access their services or volunteer to help no matter where you live. And if you have an urgent issue, call 213-235-0060. That's 213-235-0060. To get legal help, make a donation, or volunteer, visit lafla.org. lafla.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
Let's get back to more of Tavis Smiley right now.
Just kiss me once and kiss me twice and kiss me once again. It's been a long, long time. Haven't felt like this, my dear, since can't remember when. It's been a long, long time. You'll never know how many dreams I dreamed about you. Or just how empty they all seem without you. So kiss me once, and kiss me twice, and kiss me once again. It's been a long, long time.
There's some voices that are just so inimitable. When you hear them, you know who they are. It won't surprise you then that we are having a conversation in this hour with Larry Ty about his new book called The Jazz Men, How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie Transformed America. Larry Ty, I mentioned earlier that I wanted to get to this part. That's a pretty serious moniker to suggest that Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie transformed America. Make your case, sir. Make your case.
So I will. Before I do, can I make one comment on Louis Armstrong's voice?
You certainly may. It's been a long, long time. Go ahead and make your comment.
It has. So my only comment is that voice was, to me, as important as what Louis Armstrong could do with a trumpet. He could sound high notes on his trumpet that nobody could do, but his voice was arguably the most recognizable voice in the world. And it's certainly nobody's notion of a conventional, brilliant singing voice. And yet, when he was coming out, he really formed and took off. When he was coming out of Chicago, his voice was so extraordinary that young kids in the middle of winter would stick their head out of their car to try to catch cold so that they could sound like Louis Armstrong.
It's a great story. It's a funny story. I ain't trying to get sick to sound like Louis Armstrong, but his voice, you're right, it is undeniable. The minute you hear it, you know exactly what it is, and it is soothing in a lot of ways. But I love that story, Larry. Thanks for sharing it.
So I want to get to your question, and the important question is at the center of the book. How did these guys transform America, and how do I make that case? And I think what they did was, rather than going directly at Jim Crow and trying to topple it with a sort of head-on approach, what they did is they opened America's ears and souls to the magnificence of their music, to the point where people saw them not as great musicians, but not as great black musicians, but as great musicians. Mm-hmm. And I think what they did was white racist men who would never have let a black cross their threshold wooed their sweethearts with the music of Ellington and Armstrong. White women who would never have continued walking down the street if they saw a black man walking towards them in the privacy of their own living room, clicked their high heels and tapped their toes to the music of the Count Basie Orchestra. For once, when they were listening to the music of these three, America saw race disappear as an issue and just wanted to listen. And I think that is a profound way of being a quiet insurrectionist. But what I think doesn't matter. What matters is that Martin Luther King said the same thing. He said, without these guys and the jazz that they brought into American households, we would never have had school integration and so much else that was part of his civil rights revolution.
No, you're right about that, obviously, and people don't realize that King was an avid music lover and listener. We think of King, we think of Mahalia Jackson. That was one of his favorite singers, to be sure. But King had eclectic music taste, and Larry's right on point about the way that King felt about these jazz men. Again, no naivete here, Larry, but what does it mean to imbibe, to embrace all that you have just said and still to realize and to accept what you said earlier, which is that their humanity still could not be reveled in by the larger white society, which underscores again that they had to travel and stay and endure the vagaries of being on the road because they were black.
So what it says to me is that is a stain that we can't remove. It was there. It continues to resonate. It is why race remains the story of America. And you talked about it in terms of these three men. I would want to add one level, which was the reason this book is called Jazz Men rather than Jazz People or Jazz Men and Women is that there were no comparable musical stars like them. There were wonderful vocalists from Bessie Smith to Billie Holiday to Mary Lou Williams, but the idea of a black woman breaking through as an instrumentalist, as a composer, as a band leader, there's only one that I can think who did that, and it was a woman whose first two names probably wouldn't say much to your audience, and they are Lillian Harden. But if I added her third name, which is Armstrong, Louis Armstrong's second wife, she did everything. She played the piano, she composed songs, she was a band leader, and she did more than anybody to launch the career of Louis Armstrong. And so as much of a slur and a slander as it was to black men, to black women, they had the double stigma. And even Ellington, Basie, and Armstrong, who underwent all of these indignities, they joined in the majority of men in America back then of calling female vocalists thrushes and canaries and limiting their opportunities. And I think that so I just want to say that that it just seems so totally unfair that even people who recognized what was going on in terms of Jim Crow's barbarity went along with this notion that gender inequality was okay and part of the natural order.
Yeah, no, that is to use your word earlier, that's a stain, even on these African American males who have become iconic in their own pursuits and in their own right. And you mentioned Dr. King. I've written a book about King, as this audience knows, and King was guilty of that as well. None of us are perfect, but you think about the civil rights movement and all that women did to make that movement happen, to make it possible. You think about the March on Washington. They didn't allow women to speak at the March on Washington. I mean, again, the patriarchy of that era, of that day, is undeniable. Again, a stain on many of these black men of note. And yet that is the reality. And if we're going to be truthful about it, we just got to put it out there. And so there it is. I want to.
Can I just say one more thing on that? And that is just, so we were talking about the idea of being black, whether you're a man or a woman, and the idea of gender inequality. There was one other kind of bias that existed in that era, and you know it better than anybody because you know King's story better than anybody. It was the idea of what happened if you were gay, and if you were black and gay. And even the great Martin Luther King, I felt, and you know the story better than me, but I felt that he never embraced the way he might have Bayard Rustin because he worried that Rustin's being gay could somehow tarnish the movement. And I want to say, in having just said that Duke Ellington was at times a sexist, he stood by the great composer Billy Strayhorn, even though Billy Strayhorn, the world knew that Billy Strayhorn was gay. And I credit Ellington. It was an amazingly difficult thing to do back then, and yet he never backed off. And he used to say that Billy Strayhorn is my right arm and my left arm and the better part of my brain. And that was something to say back then, and that took real courage.
No, it's a powerful point. And to your point about King and Rustin, it was a very complicated relationship. But I will tell you my read of that particular story. King was clearly afraid, as was Roy Wilkins and Whitney Young and others, that if it got out that Rustin was gay, as one of the lead organizers, one of the chief organizers of that March on Washington, they were afraid of what that reality would mean. And I'm the first to tell you that King was a public servant. He was not a perfect servant. There are a number of things that we could take King to task for. Again, he was a public servant, not a perfect servant. And in many ways, he failed in that regard. And he failed in other ways as well. Fannie Lou Hamer was right and King was wrong about the convention and the Democratic Party in '68. I mean, there are all kinds of things about which we could take King to task for. Iconic and brilliant as he was, I call him, as this audience knows, I refer to him, Larry, as the greatest American this country's ever produced. That's my assessment. His faults notwithstanding, he is still the greatest American this country's ever produced. And yet, to your point, he and Ellington and others of their era, again, not perfect, they failed in many respects. But at the end of the day, like you said about Duke and Stray, Duke Ellington loved Billy Strayhorn and stood by him all along. And Dr. King had a deep and abiding love for Rustin, and if Rustin were here, he would tell you the same thing about the way he felt about King. No different than King and Stokely Carmichael. They had different ways of seeing the world, but King had a deep and abiding love for Stokely Carmichael, later Kwame Ture, and Stokely, were he here right now, would tell you the same thing about his love for Dr. King. So at least the love was real, and the love didn't get in the way, even if the politics did. The politics of that era actually did. So, but I take your point, and I'm glad you shared that. Let me do this. I want to take Duke and Lewis and count one at a time, and in your own way, however you choose to do it. Talk to me about their musical contribution as individuals, because again, your point is that these guys and all these jazz men transformed America. But let's start with Count Basie and give you some space to talk specifically about the Count.
Sure. So I'd like to take us back to who the Count was based on where he came from and then what he did. And the Count Basie came from a place that probably most of your listeners, like me, had never been to, and it was Red Bank, New Jersey. Mm-hmm. It was firmly entrenched in what was supposedly the enlightened North, and yet he faced huge racial issues when he was growing up. He was the son of a gardener and a laundress, and one of the overwhelming things in Basie's youth was secrecy. His parents had a third son that I don't think he knew about, and the world still doesn't know about, who was born out of wedlock and who sadly was farmed out to somebody else to raise in his early days, and who died of malnutrition at 6 months. And that created an aura, a shrouding of secrecy in his background that made Count Basie in later years the reticent and enigmatic figure that he was. But it also had, I think, a huge benefit for his music, that unlike the other two, Ellington and Armstrong, Count Basie was all about his side men and side women. He was the consummate band leader. And it used to be said about Count Basie, if you went and heard his band and your toes weren't tapping, you should go to the doctor the next day because there was something wrong with you anatomically.
When you referred to the Count, certainly in his later years, as enigmatic, unpack that for me.
Sure. He wrote a memoir, and I'm convinced it was probably a 350-page memoir, and I'm convinced other than the Count and the brilliant writer Al Murray who wrote it with him and me, that nobody has ever read all 350 pages. Because every time he'd come up on an interesting topic, he would say, I'm not going to tell you about that, or I don't have to go into that. He was just, by personality and temperament, a private guy. And he was also a huge character. The first thing he would do when he got into a new town was he would flag a cab, he'd put on his black captain's hat, and he would head off to the nearest racetrack because he loved the ponies. And sadly, he wasn't a very good gambler, and at some point in his life, his wife had to take over the family finances to ensure there was money left. But Count Basie, as early as 1945, imagine at the end of World War II, he was putting into his contracts that unless his audience could be integrated and unless his band could be racially integrated, he wouldn't play at that venue. And he stood up in his quiet way for equal rights in a way that was not only controversial at the time, it was almost unheard of at that early time.
When when we come forward. I'm sorry. Finish your point, Larry. I'm sorry.
No. I want to come back to the other two whenever you're ready after your break.
Oh no, we'll do the other two. Trust me. Now, I want to ask you when we come forward about that captain's hat. All of us who are Count Basie fans know the hat, that black captain's hat you're talking about, and I've never understood what the story behind that hat is. I'm sure if anybody can tell me, Larry, Ty can, about that captain's hat that Count Basie seemed to wear all the time. The book is called The Jazz Men: How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie Transformed America. Its author, Larry Ty, is our guest, and we are pleased to have him on Tavis Smiley.
Seeking the truth, speaking the truth. This is the Tavis Smiley Show.
Paid for by government.com. Did you know the United States Mint has issued a new Morgan silver dollar coin in proof condition for the first time? Not only that, they are also minted in 99.9% pure silver for the first time ever in history. Coin experts are calling this an amazing opportunity for anyone that knows the enduring popularity of Morgans. But you must hurry. Only 400,000 of these legal tender silver dollars were issued. These first ever Morgan silver dollars are brand new with stunning mirror-like finish, minted by the iconic San Francisco Mint. Call now and you're guaranteed a new first ever 99.9% pure silver proof Morgan dollar. To learn more, call 1-800-973-9717. If you order now, you will receive a free coin collector bonus pack, a $25 value, free with every order. Call 1-800-973-9717 now to secure your new Morgan silver dollars before they are gone. That's 1-800-973-9717.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Mike Moore. Now here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Officials in Greenfield, Iowa say at least 4 people are dead and 35 more are injured after a tornado tore through the small town on Tuesday. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds said the state will be requesting aid from the federal government. Much of the town of around 2,000 people was devastated by the twister that leveled homes and scattered cars and trees. A George Floyd biopic called Daddy Changed the World is in the works. The family-authorized film has his daughter Gianna and her mother Roxy Washington involved as executive producers. Gregory R. Anderson is writing the screenplay, which will cover Floyd's life as the man whose 2020 murder sparked protests across the U.S. against police brutality. It's still in search of a director. And that's the latest. I'm Mike Moore from your 24/7 news source, the Black Information Network, and BINnews.com.
Robert Half research indicates 9 out of 10 hiring managers are having difficulty hiring. Robert Half is here to help. Their recruiting professionals use proprietary AI to connect businesses with highly skilled talent. At Robert Half, they know talent. Visit roberthalf.com today.
This is the KBLA Sports Minute with Ray Richardson.
At age 39, LeBron became the oldest player to be chosen to an All-NBA team. LeBron was a third-team selection when the NBA handed out its awards for outstanding play. In 20 of LeBron's 21 seasons, he has been voted to an All-NBA team. Anthony Davis and Kawhi Leonard were All-NBA second-team selections. The first team, Nikola Jokic, Shai Gilgeous-Alexander, Luka Doncic, Giannis Antetokounmpo, and Jason Tatum. The Dallas Mavericks take Game 1 of the Western Conference Finals. They beat Minnesota by 3 in Minneapolis. Doncic and Kyrie Irving combined for 63 points. Game 2 is Friday night in Minneapolis. The Dodgers got shut out for the third time this season. They lost by 6 at home to Arizona. The Dodgers were 0 for 8 with runners in scoring position. The Angels beat Houston. The Angels are 5-5 in their last 10 games. No debates, no speculation, just the info you need. That's your KBLA Sports Minute. I'm Ray Richardson. More news, opinions, and conversation when we come forward on KBLA Talk 1580.
Helping to broaden your political and moral imagination with our 2024 Climate Justice Campaign. We're KBLA Talk 1580.
Hi, I'm Kyle at Blindster.com. At Blindster, we offer over 50 different custom window treatments, including faux wood blinds and shutters, all at prices less than retail. Plus, we'll send you free samples before you buy. Don't hire an expensive pro. Do it yourself and save big at Blindster.com.
Every day, millions face challenges that go unseen. Mental health issues affect not just individuals, but the relationships that matter most to them. Over 80% of those suffering with mental health conditions acknowledge the strain on their families. Parents grappling with depression or anxiety find even simple tasks overwhelming. At work, challenges can lead to communication breakdowns, jeopardizing careers and professional relationships. For those caring for loved ones, burnout is a stark reality. The weight of caregiving responsibilities can feel insurmountable. Children, too, feel this impact, often taking on more at home, sacrificing schoolwork and time with friends. But there's hope. Seeking support can change lives. This Mental Health Awareness Month, let's heal the relationships that matter most to us. It's okay to pray and get help. Visit normalizehelp.org for more information and resources.
We've got a lot to talk about.
Hi, I'm Ray Richardson, your sports connection here at KBLA Talk 1580. Join me and my co-host Neil Scarborough every Saturday night at 7 for Out of Bounds, the show that brings some flavor to the world of sports for 60 minutes. We take you beyond the scores and press conferences. We give you our point of view, the way black folks see what's going down. You can join the conversation and give us your analysis at 1-800-920-1580. Out of Bounds every Saturday night at 7 on KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
Unapologetically progressive. KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
You like the style, though.
We used to argue about whose turn it was to clean the gutters, but then I had leaf filter gutter protection installed.
Wait, I told you Leaf Filter had free inspections and estimates and a lifetime guarantee.
Meaning we never have to argue about whose turn it is to clean the gutters again.
But I visited leaffilter.com/beacon first.
No, I did.
It doesn't matter who. Visit leaffilter.com/beacon to schedule your free gutter inspection and get up to 30% off today.
See representative for warranty details. Promotion is 20% off plus a 10% senior or military discount. One discount per household.
When you use Bounce dryer sheets and your clothes look amazing, it's the sheet. Less static in your life? Yeah, it's the sheet. Smelling fresher than ever? It's the sheet. Oh, so soft fabric? Ooh la la. It's the sheet. Less wrinkles on your clothes? You know it's the sheet. Bounce dryer sheets. More freshness, more softness. Less static, less wrinkles. It's the sheet.
He's rooting for everybody black. Everybody black. More of Tavis Smiley coming your way right now. Right now.
Picture me up on your knee, just tea for two and two for tea, just me for you and you for me alone. Nobody near us to see us or hear us, no friends or relations on weekend vacations. We won't have it known, dear, that we own a telephone, dear. They'll break and I'll awake and start to bake a sugar cake for you to take, for all the boys to see. We will raise a family, a boy for you, a girl for me. Oh, can't you see how happy we would be?
I was saying earlier that you can't go wrong when you put Duke and Train together. And you can't go wrong when you got the Count and Ella Fitzgerald together. T for two, Count Basie and Ella Fitzgerald. Our guest in this hour is Larry Tye, author of the new book, The Jazz Men, How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie Transformed America. Larry, what do you know about that black captain's hat that you mentioned earlier that the Count always seemed to wear?
So I have two theories on the hat. One is that it was, while it's called the captain's hat, it was a sort of everyman's hat, and that was Basie's whole persona. If Duke Ellington were pictured in a hat, it was always a top hat, and that was his sort of aristocratic bearing. Count may have had an equally aristocratic name, but he was the common guy, and that's the kind of hat he wore. But I also think it was that in his later life, you watched his hair thinning increasingly, and I think he just was a little bit self-conscious about balding and was a little bit cold up on top, and the combination led him to find a hat that he could find that packed easily on the road. He would scrunch it up, and it just had everything going for it.
I accept both of those answers. By the way,
Okay.
I accept both, Larry Todd. All right, we've been talking about Count Basie. Let's talk now about Duke Ellington again. The book is called The Jazz Man, How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie Transformed America. Indeed, they did in their own way. That's the Count. Talk to me now about the Duke.
Well, so I'm inspired in talking to you about the Duke because I'm calling into you now from Washington, D.C., where Duke grew up. And to give a sense of what he was like as a young child, when he would walk down the staircase of his middle-class home in Washington, D.C., the largest and sort of the capital of the black bourgeoisie in that era, he would walk down the stairs and his young cousins would be at the bottom. And he would say to the boys, I would like you to bow. And he would say to the girls, I would like you to curtsy. And he would say to everybody, applaud, applaud. Someday I'm going to be known as the great Duke Ellington. And he used to tell great stories about where his nickname came from, but I'm convinced he bestowed it upon himself and he proved worthy of the aristocratic title. He left Washington as quickly as he could, headed for New York, got his start at a place that was the number one destination in Harlem, a place called the Cotton Club.
Mm-hmm.
And yet, where he got his start said a lot about what he had to overcome in that era. The Cotton Club, if you were black, the chance of getting in was incredibly slight, and the chance that once you got in, if you did, that you would sit near the kitchen or back out of view was a given. It was a plantation motif. He played what the Cotton Club thugs who ran it called jungle music, and this is what Duke had to put up with, but he made by far the best of it. He had a national radio hookup, and pretty soon Duke Ellington could play just about anywhere he wanted in America.
I think about that aristocratic background that Duke had as compared to somebody like Count Basie we discussed a moment ago. And I've often wondered what it is about his proclamation to his cousins, notwithstanding, bow down, curtsy, I'm going to be known one day as the great Duke Ellington. But that aristocratic background could have allowed him at some point to say, I'm not tolerating this. I have come from a well-to-do black family. I know what it means to be treated better than this. I'm not going to be denied. I'm not going to be discriminated against. I'm not going to be devalued. And yet he stuck it out, although he came from beginnings that were not so humble. What do you make of that?
So I agree with both of what the things you just said. On the one hand, he did come from an aristocratic background, and he had to stick it out. He couldn't be the true aristocrat that he deserved to be, but he fought back. He used to say that he wanted his music to speak for itself, and it did. He wrote symphonies like Black, Brown, and Beige, which told the story of African Americans in this land from slavery to the civil rights era. He wrote songs that he said he wanted to take Jim Crow out of the theater, and he wrote a play called Jump for Joy, and my favorite song was a song called King Fit the Battle of Alabama. And it was a story told in words and in music of Bull Connor turning the hoses on young black demonstrators. And Duke was there saying this is wrong at a time when it was controversial for him to say that. But he went further than that. He fought back to the point where when he was in Baltimore and students in the early 1960s were staging sit-ins at Johns Hopkins University and at the local restaurant that wouldn't serve blacks. They begged Duke to join him. He said no. Then he said yes, and he joined them, and they made headlines all across the world. He used to say that jazz ought to be renamed Negro music, and he saw his role as a musician in furthering his race through what he did musically and through what he could do with the megaphone that he had that had a worldwide reach.
Mm.
Can I say, by the way, the person who most appreciated that was the guy that you know more about again than anybody. The minute that they met for the first time on the street, Duke Ellington and Martin Luther King embraced one another as if they had known one another forever, and maybe they had somehow.
And here's Duke with Dr. King's favorite singer, Mahalia Jackson. How's that for timing?
Look down and see my people through. Lordy, Lord of love, God Almighty, God above, please look down and see my people through.
Hope, agency, dignity. This is Tavis Smiley.
What is dedication?
My biggest fear in the middle of my addiction was that my kids wouldn't have a father. And I started thinking, you know what? This isn't my story. I definitely had to become a better man to be a better father. It's important to me that my kids are empowered and truly believe that if they can think it, they can do it.
That's dedication. Visit fatherhood.gov to hear more. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
Joey from Vermont, a farmer trying to get through the winter. Adriana from South Carolina, a single mother living paycheck to paycheck. Liam from Ohio, an injured father struggling to provide for his family. Hi, I'm Shanola Hampton, and I support the Feeding America network of food banks because they help provide over 6 billion meals to people in need each year. Learn more at feedingamerica.org.
Hi, Tavis Smiley here. We're getting closer to June 18th, and time is running out for you to register to join us for our historic symposium live on C-SPAN, Tuesday, June 18th, 4 to 7 p.m. at the California Science Center in Exposition Park. Admission is free, but you must register at KBLA1580.com right now if you want to be in the audience when the nation will see for the first time ever a stage full of brilliant black folk talking about the urgency of now. Climate justice, climate equity, climate resilience. It's all going down. Well, it's actually all going up. Tuesday, June 18th, 4 to 7 p.m. live from the California Science Center in Exposition Park. Again, admission is free, but we're filling up fast. So if I were you, I would log on right now to KBLA1580.com to reserve your seat. Caring about the climate, caring about the community. We're KBLA Talk 1580. We've got your black.
Hi, I'm Henry Winkler. My eyes are very important to me. My eyes connect me with everything I love. I loved my late father-in-law dearly. He always lit up a room, but his vision dimmed with age. He had age-related macular degeneration, or AMD. And since partnering with Apellis, I've learned there's an advanced form of dry AMD called geographic atrophy, or GA. His struggle with vision loss made me want to help others know about GA's warning signs. For some, colors appear dull or washed out. For others, hazy or blurred vision make it hard to see details, like fine print on price tags. Many have trouble seeing in the dark, making driving at night difficult. GA gets worse over time and cannot be reversed. If you think you have GA, don't wait. Treatments are available. Ask a retina specialist about FDA-approved treatments for GA and go to GAWon'tWait.com.
More honesty than you can handle. More empowerment than you can imagine. You're tuned in to Tavis Smiley.
Larry Ty, given his aristocratic background, what's your research say to you about how Duke Ellington was imbued with that kind of courage and conviction and commitment and, frankly, character to be who he was and to not back down from those kinds of issues? Not every artist led that way.
So I think I would point to three sources. One was his mother, who was clearly the biggest influence in his life, who told him from the time he could hear her words that he was blessed and gave him the confidence to know that he could do anything. A second source was a teacher in school who told him that you don't have the right in this unfair world that we're born into to demand respect, but you can command respect through your actions. And that was sort of classic Booker T. Washington kind of philosophy, and Duke took that to heart. But the third thing, and we got to say this, that it is genes. It was, this guy was arguably the most brilliant all-around musician that I know in the world. He wrote 6,000 compositions, he arranged music, he played a brilliant piano, and he led the best band of his era. And the only way you can do all of that is if you are just born a prodigy and a genius.
The book is called The Jazz Men: How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie Transformed America. When we come forward in our remaining moments with Larry Ty, we'll talk about Louis Armstrong on Tavis Smiley.
What's your quarrel with the world? You're listening to Tavis Smiley.
If you're like me, 60 and retired, making ends meet, especially here at the supermarket and drugstore, is tough. I'm so blessed to have found benefitscheckup.org. It's a free and confidential website from the National Council on Aging that connected me to $1,200 a year in programs that help pay for food, medicine, utilities, and more. Maybe it can help you. benefitscheckup.org.
My daughter was diagnosed with a rare malignant rhabdoid tumor on the spine. They sent her straight to St. Jude. My hope was gone. But when you get there, everyone's like, hey, we're not going to give up. And when you see other people not giving up on your child, that makes all the difference in the world. When I found out I didn't have to pay, I was just grateful. They saved my baby's life.
Finding cures, saving children. Learn more at stjude.org.
KBLA Talk 1580. We've got a lot to talk about.
KBLA Talk 1580 believes in community empowerment through the arts. Tia Chucha Central Cultural is on a mission to transform community in the Northeast San Fernando Valley and beyond through ancestral knowledge, the arts, literacy, and creative engagement. The Northeast San Fernando Valley has a population of about 500,000, the size of the city of Oakland, yet it has no bookstores, art galleries, or full-fledged cultural spaces until Tia Chuchas opened its doors in 2001. Founded by renowned poet and activist Luis Rodriguez, Tia Chuchas Cultural Center provides a year-round free or low-cost arts and literacy bilingual intergenerational programming in mural painting, music, dance, writing, visual arts, healing art sessions, and healing talking circles. Activities also include Mexica, Aztec dance, indigenous cosmology, philosophy, and 2 weekly open mic nights, one in Spanish, the other in English. In addition, they host author readings, film screenings, and art exhibits. To express yourself, heal yourself, attend an event, or volunteer, please visit www.tiachucha.org. That's TIACHUCHA.org. This is a community call to action from KBLA Talk 1580.
You know where you want to go in life, and City National Bank can help. City National knows the dedication it takes to build your vision for the future into a reality, and our team is here for you. We have a wide range of options to help, from personal savings accounts to interest-bearing money market savings accounts and more. all designed to help you get where you want to go. City National, here for every stage of the journey. Learn more at cnb.com. City National Bank is a subsidiary of Royal Bank of Canada. Member FDIC.
Helping to make you the most knowledgeable person in your circle of friends. This is Tavis Smiley.
This is Tavis Smiley in his remaining moments, his last 5 remaining moments, minutes to be exact, with our friend and brother Larry Tye, author of the new book, The Jazz Men, How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie Transformed America. I think it's fair to say, Larry Tye, that of these 3, Armstrong, Ellington, and Basie, Armstrong gets the most attention. Yes? No? Would you disagree with that?
So I totally agree with that. And in the 1940s, 50s, and 60s, the 2 most recognizable Americans all around the world were Mickey Mouse and Louis Armstrong. And he was a symbol of America, and I think he was a symbol of America at its very best.
Turn that up, Miles. I just want to hear a little bit of that. Everybody knows it. We all love it, though.
I see skies of blue and clouds of white, the bright blessed day, the dark sacred night, and I think to myself, what a wonderful world. The colors of the rainbow, so pretty in the sky, are also on the faces of people going by. I see friends shaking hands, saying, how do you do? They're really saying, I love you.
Larry Tye, what say you about the cultural, worldwide impact of that particular track?
So what I say is the idea that this guy, given all he had dealt with in his life, he grew up in a neighborhood of New Orleans that was so tough it was called the battlefield. At 13, he was swept off the street into a reform school. Given what he went through, the idea that he could say and sing as convincingly as he does that this is a wonderful world says that this guy was the most consummate optimist. It also says he could take a song as mediocre in anybody else's hands as Wonderful World and make it into a soulful melody. Only Louis Armstrong could do that.
What is your sense of their legacy? Obviously, they have their individual legacies, but the book is called The Jazz Men, How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie Transformed America. What is your take on their legacy all these decades later?
Sure. So 2 halves of the legacy. One, Miles Davis said it most simply and beautifully when he was talking about Louis Armstrong, but he could have been talking about all 3 of them. He said, know you, know me. And without them, jazz would have looked nothing like what it did and not nearly as resonant and spectacular. But more importantly, your listeners all know about their musical legacy. I'm here to say they've got another equally important half of their legacy, which is they weren't just out there performing for themselves and their audiences. They were out there trying to make the world a place, and trying wouldn't have been enough. They succeeded in making it a better place, and that is a profound legacy, every bit as important as their music.
Speaking of a profound legacy, this is an amazing book. And all kinds of persons have offered praise for this book, The Jazz Men. But there is one of these persons who have expressed themselves about what this book is that stands out for me above all others. On the back of the book, again, some great persons who are writing plaudits to Larry Tye for what he's done in this book. But one of them is a guy named Sonny Rollins. And Sonny Rollins has this to say: The Jazz Men tells an uplifting and unifying story that is especially important now when times are so fractured. I've been honored in my career to have befriended Sonny Rollins, to have interviewed him on this program, on television, any number of times. And I bow down every time I see his name. And Larry Tye, we say that's high cotton to get Sonny Rollins to endorse your book, man.
Well, so it was one of the greatest pleasures of doing this book was getting to talk in 2 long conversations with Sonny Rollins, who's the best.
Yeah, he is indeed. He is indeed. I'm
So
out of
are
time.
you.
Yeah, well, you are kind. You are the best, my friend. You're very kind. The book is called The Jazz Men, How Duke Ellington, Louis Armstrong, and Count Basie Transformed America. For the text, we thank our friend and brother Larry Tye. Larry, you've done it again, my friend. All the best to you, sir.
Thank you to you too. Bye-bye.
Thank you, sir. Tomorrow, Friday, the best of Tavis Smiley. Going to be tough this week, picking 3 great hours. We've had some great hours every single day. You might have missed it, so tomorrow, check out the best of Tavis Smiley on these stations across America. Until tomorrow, and as always, keep the faith.
KBLA 1580 Santa Monica.
Thanks for joining us. I'm Mike Moore. Now here's the latest from the Black Information Network. Officials in Greenfield, Iowa say at least 4 people are dead and 35 more are injured after a tornado tore through the small town on Tuesday. Iowa Governor Kim Reynolds said the state will be requesting aid from the federal government. Much of the town of around 2,000 people was devastated by the twister that leveled homes and scattered cars and trees. A George